I'm Dr. Cameron Garber with Body Smart, and I want to explain a really quick concept that hopefully will help people understand a little bit more about how calories are used in their body. It's something that when I test people's metabolism, that we use to help explain why different calories matter and how they respond in our bodies. And it's a big factor in people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes and other things that we talk about a lot with them. So one thing that they watch a lot is their A1C levels, which is essentially how much their average blood sugar is. And one of the ways that we look at that is how much sugar is bound to your hemoglobin. And so in looking at that, we can tell how high your average blood sugar levels are, how often you're spiking beyond normal levels, because our body likes to keep certain things in what we call homeostatic values. And when we're outside of certain ranges, then the body releases different hormones to bring things back under control. So one of the biggest things that our body's trying to regulate is our blood sugar. So our body likes to really keep our blood sugar typically, and this is a generalization obviously, but between 80 and 120 is kind of that magic zone where it likes to keep our blood sugar. And so when we eat food, it causes our blood sugar to rise and fall a little bit. And so one of the things I talk with people about why processed foods are so hard on our body, why our body really doesn't like them, and why it causes problems, and especially weight gain and other things, is the way that processed foods affect our blood sugar. So I always use an example of an apple versus applesauce and the difference that makes in our body. When we eat an apple, which is, a whole food, if you will, some of these terms have been kind of stolen or repurposed, I guess, and changed the nature behind them. But an apple is a real food, versus applesauce is we've processed it. We've essentially pre-digested that applesauce for you, broken it down so your gut doesn't have to do the work of breaking it down. And so eating applesauce is definitely going to make your blood sugar go up, but it may not make it spike and go up all that terribly high. Whereas eating applesauce, the main difference is the blood sugar spike that it causes, and then your body will bring that back down. Now, if we look at the total change in our blood sugar, so the area under these curves, so this area under this slope versus this area under this slope, right? It's going to be about the same area, because the applesauce that you made from that same size apple is going to have the same amount of sugar as the apple that you ate, right? Same amount of sugar. The difference is how quickly was that sugar available to my body. And so that's the big difference here. Same amount of sugar, so the glycemic load is the same, but the glycemic index is essentially the measure of how quickly that sugar can be absorbed. And so the slope of this line here, that absorption rate of our body, or how quickly it makes our blood sugar spike. So what happens when we have a food that has a lot faster absorbing sugar is it triggers once we kind of hit a certain point, and it may not be exactly at 120, but as that's spiking faster, the body says, uh-oh, blood sugar is spiking. So at about this point, it triggers it to release insulin. It says, okay, we need to release insulin so we can bring our blood sugar back within normal levels. And so what insulin does is it essentially triggers the body to say, this amount we need to store as fat. Unless we're doing something active at that time where we're using those calories up really quickly, what it normally cues it to do is store that excess amount of sugar as fat, especially when we're up here a lot, when we're eating a lot of processed foods. And so we're constantly spiking that blood sugar high. It gives it more and more cues to store that or to bring that blood sugar back down. And so insulin is a really good fattening agent. It's really good at getting us to store calories because it's constantly working on bringing our blood sugar back down into normal levels. And so that's often the cue that we get, depending on our activity levels and other things. That's often the cue that our body gets when we have an insulin release, is it's telling the cells, hey, I need your help to bring this blood sugar level back down. So it stores that excess amount as fat until we're back within normal levels and insulin levels can decline. And so really, really common process that we see happen in our body. So that's something that I tell people a lot. An easy test to know whether or not your food is a processed food versus a real food is have it see if it'll pass the water test. So the water test is toss it in a bowl of water for 20 or 30 minutes and what happens to it. You know, the difference between breakfast cereal and actual grains. You know, every cereal claims to be whole grains, even though they've been like broken down, pre-digested, glued back together with sugar and flour, and then sprayed vitamins on in a sugar slurry, where they mix the vitamins in with a sugar solution and spray it on to the breakfast cereal. That's how it's made. And if you leave it in a bowl of water for 20 minutes, it'll be a soggy mess. So not really a real food. It's a food product that is gonna do this same thing, right? You're gonna get a blood sugar spike. Not a great way to start your day, by spiking your blood sugar really high and essentially training your body to burn carbohydrate predominantly. So you think about real foods, even cheeses or things like that, if you toss it in a bowl of water, are going to be just fine when you pull it back out. Meats, fruits, vegetables, even whole grains, so real grains versus like an instant oats or your oats that cook in minutes versus the oats you feed a horse. There's a big difference. The oats that you feed a horse, or real oats or real grains like steel cut oats, even, you toss it in a bowl of water and come back 20 minutes later and there's not going to be much of a difference. The more real that is and the less processed that is, it's going to be just fine. And so that's a good indicator of how quickly your body's going to be able to absorb those foods. And in my opinion, one of the big reasons why we have a hard time maintaining a healthy weight when we eat a diet that is high in processed foods. The more that we can eat foods that are slower for our body to digest, where it has to break it down and go get those nutrients instead of just having them be instantly available, that makes a big difference. White bread is a great example of something that we actually have enzymes in our saliva that starts breaking that down, and that's why it tastes so good, so sweet. But we will see with white bread, actually your blood sugars start to spike faster than just eating table sugar alone at times. So it has a higher glycemic index. Wonder Bread did anyway. I'm not sure if all white breads do. But kind of interesting that difference. So kind of an interesting concept at looking at why certain foods affect our blood sugar more than others and why they can make us fatter than other foods. And so eating more real foods that are less processed and more real ingredients and that can pass that water test, toss it in a bowl of water and what happens to it, that can really help. So that's why certain foods like meal replacement shakes, granola bars, and things like that aren't necessarily helpful in weight loss. They've not been shown to be very effective in long-term maintaining weight loss because they're training our body to do essentially this, and for a lot of other reasons. But you know, a granola bar is a great option if you're on a hike or need quick energy. But as a meal replacement, maybe not such a great idea. Digests really quickly, spikes levels. You're more hungry at your next meal. Things like that. So trying to eat foods that are a slower release, less processed, more whole foods are going to be a lot better. So let me know if you've got any questions about that. Questions, concerns, comments. Would love to talk with you about that. But just kind of one idea as to why what you're eating may have an effect on your total health. Thanks so much.